Hello, this is Sinta Ebersohn from Fair Divorce, and today we're going to talk about financials. With me here is William Barret. He's a certified financial planner, and he's been doing this for 15 years, assisting people in planning their financial portfolios and more, and also working with people who are going through divorce. William, thank you very much for being here and welcome.
Sinta, thank you so much. Lovely to see you and lovely to be with all our viewers. Talking about the financial portfolio and divorce in the same sentence is difficult. It's stressful, and I guess what we would like to unpack today is to assist our viewers and our listeners to realize that even though it's a daunting task, if you've got the right person to hold your hand and take you through this process, one can actually achieve a workable outcome. And if we can bring this home to a couple of clients, that would be lovely for me today.
Yes, definitely. So please tell us more. When you're going through divorce, where do you start?
Well, Sinta, firstly, you need to understand what type of marriage contract that you've got. In South Africa, there's basically two. The one is you are either married in community of property, which means upon divorce, both parties' estates will be joined, and that would be divided equally 50-50. And that's not only for assets, that's also for liabilities.
Yes.
The second marital contract is in community of property, erf community of property, with or without the accrual. In layman's terms, it means if you are married without the accrual, it means whatever you and your ex-partner or spouse gained, your estate gained during the time of the marriage, that remains yours and hers remains hers. If you are married with the accrual, it's a little bit more complex because in essence what you do is you take your assets before you got married and your spouse's assets before he got married, and that is excluded. What you build up during the marriage then essentially gets divided 50-50. Now let's look at this from a practical point. Normally, the husband continues working, and sometimes the wife takes a step back out of a career and she raises the kids. In essence, her estate is growing a lot slower than that of her partners. And this is where the accrual is so vital, because upon divorce, even though the wife did not contribute from a monetary perspective, she was not in the workers' force and she was not employed, which meant technically or righteously she should be able to get some of the assets for that effort. And that is where the accrual is really critical. Then we also need to understand that in terms of, so we've got in community of property, everything gets divided half. With the accrual, half what you acquired during the marriage, and then without the accrual, what's yours is yours, mine is mine. That's the first thing that I deem extremely important. The second thing that is just as important, and here I'm speaking from personal experience, is aim for a uncontested divorce or find a mediator as soon as possible. The reason I'm saying this is when you can go for mediation, you can agree on certain things which does not require a lawyer to agree upon. And that an uncontested divorce, and with the help of a mediator, will be, the divorce would be settled within a couple of weeks up until a few months, and would cost something between 2,000 to 20,000 Rand. Contested divorces, and I'm sure this is where you will be able to elaborate, can take years and would cost hundreds, maybe millions of rands, depending on how big the estate is.
Yes, I want to just add that the cost of a mediation is hard to estimate beforehand because it depends largely on the cooperation of the parties and also the size of the estate. In other words, the amount of work that needs to be done in a mediation process. But it is definitely much more cost effective than a litigation process.
Yes, and once again, that is it's a lot less taxing on you because it doesn't take so long, and also on the children. My folks got divorced when I was 6, and it was quite a traumatic experience to go with my mother to the divorce lawyer and hear him say bad things about my father. I mean, that's not something that a 6-year-old should be able or should experience. So that's the second thing that I think is, especially for a fair divorce, and when you put the kids at the center of everything that you do, opt for an uncontested, and first of all, also look for a mediator.
Yeah, agreed. Yes, great.
Okay, so now you know how you are married, and yes, you've done, you found a mediator. The third thing that most people underestimate is the importance of your will, especially when you are going through a divorce or if you are just divorced. How legislation works is, in essence, the law gives you 3 months in order where you don't have to make, or where you're allowed to make updates to your last will and testament. If you don't make any updates within the first 3 months and you die or pass away, the law will treat your will as if your ex-partner died before you. In other words, he or she will not be able to inherit any of your assets within the first 3 months. But if you die after 3 months, after you got divorced and you have not updated your will, your ex-spouse would be legally entitled to the previous or your last will, where he is still one of the heirs or she is still one of the heirs. And that means your assets would not be disposed of like you really wanted to.
Well, that's actually shocking. So you have to do it within 3 months. Does that the 3 months start from the date you summons for a divorce, or from the day that you are actually divorced?
From the day when you get divorced, you only have 3 months not to update your will.
All right.
If something happens with you in, say, month 2, then your ex-spouse would totally be taken out of the will, as if he died before you.
Yes.
But on 3 months and 1 day, he comes back out of the death and he's been put back into your will. So make sure that you update your last will and testament. I've had some clients where it was quite amicable and both parties drafted their wills that the kids would benefit. And if you can get to that point in the divorce, I firmly believe that that's the best, because the kids need to benefit the most. Some people, we talk about testamentary trust, where when I pass away, a trust gets erected, my life insurance paid to the trust, and a father, a brother, somebody else, a mediator can be a co-trustee, and that the income then that the trust generates would be able to look after my kids. There's different options on how to maintain the trust, because it can be quite expensive. We're looking at auditing fees, trustees fees, those kind of things. But there's different products where in your will you attach the small protection plan, and all those fees, executives fees, in some instances estate duty, can be covered. And that I'll come back to that a little bit later in the closing part of this conversation. Then please help me if I'm wrong, but now that we know what's important, now we have to go and look at what type of assets do myself own and what type of assets is owned by my partner. Normally, the two big ones are the house or real estate, and the other one is a pension fund or a provident fund or some type of retirement planning. Once again, this is very interesting because the law makes provision for a clean break principle. And in essence, what that means is your divorce went through and you make a clean break. If you are married in community of property, then you can go and claim against the pension fund immediately. If you are married out of community of property, with or without the accrual, that would be determined by your divorce agreement. But it's very important that in your divorce agreement, the specific pension fund name is stated clearly, correctly, the amount is specified or the percentage is specified, because if that's not crystal clear, sometimes a pension fund can repudiate a claim like that, and then the whole litigation process needs to start again. That brings me to the other big asset, which is normally property. And once again, it's difficult, but if through mediation you can agree on how to split the proceeds, I would strongly advise that, because sometimes it is just not the right time to sell a property. And then, then if you have the financial means, just sit out and wait for the next property boom cycle, and that's always easier if you've discussed this with the mediator and you are in a position to keep that asset.
I like to also advise my clients that, especially with the big assets like property and even pension funds, to be aware of the best time to sell and liquidate it into cash, because like you said, there are times where it's not the best, and there are also incidents where it's not in the best interest of the family as a whole. If you divide assets and their net worth actually becomes less if you look at what's left over once you've done that. So I like what you're saying. It's important to look at it from a purely financial point of view and decide or base your decisions on what would be the best for both parties' financial future.
I totally agree with you, and I can give you two examples where things did not work out well. The one was a divorce that took a while, and it was not the right time to sell the house, but unfortunately both parties could not agree, and the housing market was down, and between the two of them, they lost about R500,000. They dropped the property price with R500,000. And if you think about that, that's money that can go towards education, medical aid, etc., etc. So rather try and hold on and wait for the market to turn. The second thing that's critically important as well, when we're talking about the pension fund or the retirement fund, there's so many laws and different scenarios. It can actually be a whole webinar by itself.
That's true.
Because yes, whether or not you're older than 55 or younger than 55, whether or not it's a private pension, the main thing to consider is if you say, I want my half or my portion of my partner's pension, and that money gets paid out to you, there are certain tax. Jy het gesê ek moet net weer begin by?
Begin net weer by, jy het gesê that the other thing that's vitally important.
Okay, yeah, all right. The other thing that's vitally important is to consider cashing out your ex-partner's pension fund, or rather transferring that to a preservation fund, depending on if you're older than 55 or not. And the reason I'm saying this is there's massive tax implications. If you withdraw that money you will be taxed. And imagine one client paying 400,000 Rand in tax and only receiving 600,000 Rand in a bank, and the other client transferring, say, about 800,000, and they invest that for a period over 20 years. Obviously, the one who invested more will get more compound growth. And this is where it's so important to speak to a financial planner to make sure that the right procedures are followed, and the right vehicles. Because if you're older than 55, different vehicles apply, where to invest it, how to invest it. So I would strongly advise that there's a good time to get professional help when you talk about reinvesting or withdrawing a portion, or how to withdraw that, and how to make sure that this withdrawal is really the best tax efficient way of handling it.
Yes, and that's where you come in, and that's why you're here.
Indeed. Speaking about another big implication on divorce, where I've seen some of the biggest fights, is with regards to the medical aid.
Yes.
Normally, and I've had some of this beautiful, warm and fuzzy divorces where the ex-husband agrees to keep his ex-wife on his medical aid because it is cheaper to have a principal member as well as an adult dependent, as opposed to having two principal members.
Yes.
And they always start nice, and it's always, no, it's fine. But then life happens, and the ex-husband meets somebody new, and now he needs to remove the ex-partner to put on his new partner. And so my advice is, get your own medical aid. Normally, according to the divorce agreement, one partner would be responsible for premiums, say for maybe a year, sometimes two, but make sure that it's crystal clear who's paying for the medical aid where the kids are covered. Sometimes, life happens and a medical aid isn't paid and a kid breaks an arm, and then it's just havoc. So make sure you get your own medical aid from the beginning. The other good reason for that is, if both parties try to stay on the same medical aid, the one might use a doctor more, might use the savings more, and that always ends in a little bit of conflict. So rule one, get your own medical aid. And then, speaking about medical aids or health, another very important portion of your portfolio to go and revisit is life insurance policies. I don't know what your experience has been, but sometimes I've seen that normally the husband, they handle the life insurance portfolio, and when the divorce happens, the other party are not 100% sure where to go, how much cover do they need, and that can also be quite a daunting task. What's your thoughts on that, Sinta?
Yes, I have seen quite often in grey divorces, as we call them, where older couples in their 50s or 60s or even later get divorced, where there's been 20 or 40 years of one party handling the financial affairs and the other person being totally uninformed about what's going on. And then when they divorce, they find themselves in a position where they don't even know where to start. They don't even know what insurance is out there, and which companies they are with and what they are worth or what the premiums are. They know absolutely nothing. So it's very, very stressful for a person who's been used to somebody else taking care of those things on their behalf for decades, and then suddenly they have to handle their own financial portfolio. That in itself, I've seen so often has been, I'll go as far to say, a traumatic experience.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I like the term, where you call them the grayer divorces. It's frightening because they've never made a financial decision on their own.
Yes.
And now they have to make a lot of decisions in a short space of time.
Very true.
But I guess that's where it's so important to partner with somebody who really has got the time and also the experience to take you through the whole process, to show you that, yes, it looks daunting, but if we take this step by step, you will be okay.
Yes.
And that's that peace of mind that I feel is so important, and especially the understanding and the empathy, because your mind is on dealing with the trauma of the divorce and the heartache, and now you are basically, you need to make financial decisions as well. So I believe that guidance and support is critical. Just to revert back to that life insurance that I said that needs to be revisited, obviously your financial situation changed, and I believe that revisiting the life insurance part of your portfolio is one where you can easily save a few rand. It's one where you can easily determine if you are getting enough value for money, and that's quite, I want to say, in the budgeting wheel, you can look 9 out of 10 times you can save money. Not necessarily saying on the long term it's best, but when budgets are tight, I think there you can go and negotiate a little bit of a wiggle room, to call it that. I said, good idea to change the beneficiaries, good idea to make sure that if there's if one partner is responsible for maintenance, the right thing to do, according to me, and I believe it slots right bang into your view as well at Fair Divorce, is I know I've got a certain obligation to pay X amount over time for maintenance. Then I think that the person who's responsible for that should at least have that amount of life cover.
Yes.
Should something happen, that at least that that maintenance is covered, because otherwise a claim would be lodged against his estate, and then obviously that would be covered. So life insurance is also a very affordable way. As a matter of fact, I think it's the most affordable way where you can make provision for maintenance in the event of your untimely death or disability.
Yes, I was just about to ask you about disability, because that should be covered also. Just to take care of children if something happens, something untimely happens to you.
Absolutely. And then once again, this is where you need a proper financial plan, and to make sure that you get the best bang for your buck. You don't want to be paying too much, but you want to be covered correctly.
Yes.
So yeah, but yeah, you can't find a better way to cover your maintenance in respect of life insurance or disability cover. Also, what I've seen is, and sorry for interrupting, just a last comment on this one. What I've seen is, once a divorce has been settled, sometimes the other partner needs to start working again, or they need to earn more income, and that's also a good time to revisit this, because you need proper protection. I always explain it. I say, if I had a machine that once a month I walked into the machine and I took out X amount of money, I would look after that machine.
That's true.
And we are that machine. So make sure that that machine that produces that X amount of money every month is covered properly. That's
great. William, just a question with regard to changing beneficiaries on your insurance policies. Is there any period of time, what's the word I'm looking for? Similar to the 3 months that we have after divorce to change our wills? Do we have any leeway with beneficiaries?
No, there's no specific time, but importantly is the person who's the owner of the policy is the person who can change the beneficiary.
Yes.
So say, for example, myself and you are married, but I'm the owner of the policy, then only I can make changes on the policy and vice versa. So it's important to establish who's the owner of the policy, and that person would be able to make the changes. Sometimes it's just better to take out new cover where you are the owner. And in other instances, it can be better to cede the policy back to the life covered, which in essence makes you the owner.
Yes.
But because life insurance are generally getting more affordable because people are living longer, I always advise, it's no harm done to get a new quote and just to see how we can wiggle that. But yeah, beneficiaries are very important, and also who the owner of the policy is.
That's wonderful. Okay, well, thank you for that. What else is there? Is there anything else that we need to consider immediately?
Sinta, in summary, and it latches onto what you said. Yes, it is a difficult situation, but very importantly, you must know and understand that you are now financially independent, which means own bank account, own short-term insurance, own financial portfolio, make intelligent, well thought out choices on capital that is in the estate. And then, you although it feels like you're the first person who's going through this, luckily you're not.
Yes.
And there are professionals who's been through the process who would gladly assist in helping you to make the right choices. I always say that first 2 or 3 years after a divorce, if the right advice was obtained, it's not necessarily that you would be financially ruined. Make the right decisions early, and it would have a long and compound effect towards retirement.
Yes, that's very, very well said. Valuable wisdom that you're sharing there. Just a last thing, if anybody who's watching this is wondering, I will add William's contact details in the comments below wherever we post this video on social media, so you'll be able to find it there. And then a last question I wanted to just ask you, William, something that I've experienced quite often in dealing with people who go through divorce. When it comes to things like the house, for example, more often than not, both parties want to keep the house, and that they will engage in quite a considerable amount of conflict to achieve that. But I find that something that people don't consider is once they've divorced and they've separated their portfolios and they're now supposed to be independent and looking after themselves, they might end up getting the house in the divorce, but they might end up not being able to afford the house. So they can't afford the upkeep and the maintenance or the levies and the rates and taxes and things that go with the house. So have you experienced that, and how would you advise people to just be aware of that as well?
It is very difficult because you love that house. That was your dream house, or that was your first house. And you want to hold on to that with everything in you. But unfortunately, parties, 99% of the time, both parties in a divorce suffer financially. And that is something that you need to face and that you need to come to grips with. So even though I'm saying try to take the sentiment out of it, be prepared that your dream house or your first house might not be the one where you are going to live in after the divorce. Because all of a sudden it was a joint income, now it's one income. You don't have one expense, you've got now two expenses.
Yes.
So your income half and your expenses double. And it's quite unrealistic to expect that you would be able to afford the same lifestyle. So with big assets like a house where there's something sentimental about, it's few and far between where the one person can maintain the rates and taxes. The short-term insurance needs to be moved, you know. So rather scale down sooner, and then do not be dumped in this massive overhead expense that you were not normally, that was normally carried by two incomes and is now carried by one. Rather take a step back and then in future stabilize and then go on in the future. Whereas if you're in over your head, it's very, very difficult. It's like quicksand, it's very difficult to get out of that. Rather land on a rock solid foundation and then start building your income and your career, and then maybe one day you will have a better house. But yeah, it's difficult, and it's the sad fact is one income versus more expenses versus two income and one expense, and that's the main reason why the big asset like the house is always such a difficult thing to come to an agreement with.
Yes, very true. I'm reminded of something, I think it's Warren Buffett that said, if you can not control your emotions, you won't be able to control your money, or something to that effect. And with divorce, unfortunately, we end up making so many decisions with our emotion that are actually supposed to be clear and concise financial decisions that are void of emotions. But that's part of the process, and that's how we learn. And that's why we have people like you to support us and advise us through a process like that.
That's what we aim to do. We aim to hold the party's hand through I try to bring calmness when a storm is really thumping on you. Somebody to hold your hand, somebody to take you through the process, and just in collaboration with other professionals, try and finalize the process and get you back on your feet as quickly as possible, with peace of mind that your children are looked after, especially in the event of minors, you know. You want that peace of mind.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much, William. That was very insightful and inspiring.
Sinta, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Lovely to see you. And looking forward to talk to you again.
Yes, we'll do. I think there are some other topics that we can make whole new discussions about. So let's make it. Okay. Thanks, William.
Thank you, Sinta. Goodbye.
Bye.